Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 36 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be all about what I'm going to refer to as the trope endemic in the book world and publishing industry. Now, this is a topic that has been coming up over the last few years, especially with romance and fantasy or romantasy books, and it's actually still continuing to come up in the online book community even currently. And I actually found a Reddit post that I want to share today that says a lot on this topic, and I'm assuming I can read anything out loud written online on a public forum, but I'm going to link the original post just in case you guys also want to go read for yourselves. So this post was made about a year ago in Reddit, and the post is titled, "The excessive tropification of romance is very annoying." I don't usually pick up books of the romance genre, but since it's so common as a subgenre in other books, I feel like I can speak to it. I'm writing this after finishing Paradoxum. It's a science fiction that has a huge romantic subplot, and that romance was very well book talk-like. The prose was not bad overall, and the science fiction part was well done. But all the romance scenes felt really samey, and I find this to be true for nearly all romances nowadays. The girl is smart and stubborn, the guy is hot and annoyingly flirtatious, and you can probably write the book in your head without me saying anything else. There's one scene when the characters have to sleep inside a spacecraft hidden in a lab, and you guessed it, there's only one bed. Most of their interactions are based on him throwing witty, flirtatious jokes at her, and her getting annoying/blushing. He says the word a lot. I'm not gonna say any those words. They think about each other's bodies constantly in a very I hate that he's so hot way. He lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. You get the idea. I don't know, it feels like the same book and the same writing style over and over again. The same way you can almost always tell when a book started as fanfiction, you can tell when it was written after a hefty diet of TikTok and Instagram. These kinds of books feel like they were written in around very specific indulgent scenes and lines. Example, only one bed or who hurt you tropes. With very little effort to develop the characters or their relationship beyond that, like a kid playing out their fantasies and smashing their Barbies together. Feels like collective tissue with no vital organs. To me, this whole thing is a repeat scenario of the romantic comedies of the 90s and 2000s, I'm guessing means. But for books, everything has the same plot, the same characters, and the same ending. I guess it's fine if you just want to appeal to that niche of book talk and bookstagram readers, but it feels so uncreative. It definitely doesn't work for people outside of that niche. End of post. Not gonna lie, Reddit is kind of an awesomely savage place if I do say so myself. But anyways, this post definitely hits on a couple of points I want to expand on. But before we go into some of those points, I do want to discuss some of the origin and prose of romance tropes, and specifically these ones as I'm not much of a fantasy or romantasy reader currently, and don't feel that I have as much knowledge to speak to those ones. So honestly, one of the main origins of tropes is with almost all things nowadays, TikTok, or in this case, book talk, where I feel like tropes used to be left up to the reader, more to notice for themselves and used to describe a book in more concise terms. However, publishing industries definitely started noticing this and picking up on the use of tropes, and even infusing them into their own official book descriptions when trying to market books to the public. Hence, tropes became a major marketing tool in the publishing industry. And it's gotten to the point now where authors themselves seem to be writing to cater more to this marketing tool and to its target audiences rather than writing an authentic story. In addition, tropes are honestly reducing books down to the bare minimum, where most people might only be able to describe a book by their one word or phrase trope, rather than really trying to recount any actual details about the plot or characters. One recent example I have of this, although there are many, is the Dream Harbor series by Laurie Gilmore. Most people would probably recognize the first one, the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, especially after all the hype it got, I feel like last fall, pretty much. But if you look at every single book in this series, they all use the same formatting in their book descriptions, at least on Goodreads, where they actually have a, quote, tropes section. not even trying to be subtle anymore, I guess. And the description or headlines on other platforms follow a similar format where you just get these one-liners listing out all the tropes found in these books. For example, her latest release, The Strawberry Patch Pancake House, which I actually did read, FYI, reads, "A brand new, small-town spring romance, perfect for fans of forced proximity, found family, and slow-burn rom-coms in 2025! Exclamation point. Anyways, I guess I'm starting to get into the problems that tropes have created, so let me backtrack a bit and say this. I think the main reason tropes became so popular and widely used is simply because they do create a sense of comfort and familiarity for readers, again, especially in the romance genre. In some sense, it's nice to be able to find books that are similar to ones that you've already read and loved. It makes it more likely that you're going to enjoy the book, not to mention that it makes book recommendations easier when you can group certain books together, which has definitely made ideating content easier when you can make 100 types of book rec videos based on this or that trope. One example I can think of for a trope that is still having its moment in the spotlight is enemies to lovers, which has extended specifically as well to the romantasy subgenre. I swear, every other person I know who reads romance and romantasy is an enemies to lovers lover. Except for me. Oops. And so this is a trope that continues to be utilized over and over again. In a way, reusing tropes does create a sense of predictability, which I feel like people who are romance book lovers do tend to prefer, as, let's be honest, probably 95% of romance novels end in some form of HEA. So you already know that the main love interests are going to end up together, despite whatever conflicts, mix-ups, and miscommunications they might face. And for people who are diehard romance book lovers, I feel like HFN just doesn't cut it, even though these types of endings usually lend to a more interesting story, at least in my opinion, and maybe a few select others. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. Anyways, going back to the issues created. While tropes have been able to create a lot of buzz and hype around certain books, it seems that they're also starting to take away from books as well as the reader's experience of said books. And that's partly because some of these books aren't living up to the initial hype created by their tropes, which lets down the readers. And I feel like this is why second book syndrome in fantasy/romantasy has also become an issue, as the first book in a series will get a lot of hype and hook everyone into continuing the series. Then, when the second book rolls around, authors aren't addressing all the finer points and details that the readers might want, and instead focus on and maybe even contrive certain elements related more to the tropes. At least this is part of my thinking. Of course, I haven't read these series, but from what I heard from friends and other readers online, this is what seems to have happened with the Empyrean, i.e. the Fourth Wing, as well as the Powerless series. Again, at least for some people. There are probably countless other examples with the number of romantasy series that have been released over the last couple years, and basically everyone wanting to write the next ACOTAR. But even I can remember all the buzz I kept hearing about these series, in particular when their first books came out, and some of the disappointment that ensued with the second books. And another problem with this focus and contriving of the plots and characters is that it makes the story less authentic and believable at times. I don't know if this is necessarily a trope, but one specific example I'm thinking of is this scene that happens in The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Some of you might know what I'm about to say. So basically, if you haven't read that book, there's a scene in The Love Hypothesis where Olive and Adam attend this seminar or talk, and somehow, when Olive arrives, there's absolutely nowhere in sight to sit. So, of course, the obvious solution, which to me would have been to sit on the floor or the stairs, by the way, but yes, for her, it is to sit on Adam's lap. And I'm mentally facepalming as I say that. Like, they're literally at a renowned researcher's talk, and she's sitting in front of his lap, probably in front of hundreds of people. And this is just one example of how contriving makes for cringiness in romance books, or at least if that is what is actually happening in this case. Of course, this is me speculating a bit on my part. But also a more general example, which was mentioned in the Reddit post, is the quote one bed trope, where they're accidentally given a room with one bed and there are absolutely no other rooms or accommodations available in sight. And to be fair, I can see how this kind of trope used to be used to propel the romance storyline forward or speed things up a little bit between our two main love interests. But when the same tropes are being used over and over again to drive the plot or for whatever reason, again, it just feels very unoriginal, especially to us readers who are devouring romance books by the tens or dozens month to month and do want to read somewhat of a bit of a different storyline between each book. Now, continuing on this idea of lack of originality, as well as circling back to the point on authors catering to these tropes, it's created a problem for both new and well-known authors alike. For well-known authors, it's starting to feel like every book they write, whether it's a continuation of a series or a brand new book, has to cater to some aspects of these popular tropes. And in particular, I would say the characters in some of these books are starting to become really contrived in terms of the way they behave. In addition, a lot of indie or authors trying to debut seem to be following this tropey style of writing as well, since it has worked in the past for authors to garner attention to their books. And one note I was going to make on this is that I actually get a lot of DMs from new indie authors asking me to read their brand new romance or romantasy novel. And those are the genres I get the most DMs about, although I do get a couple other types of genres submitted to me as well. But looking at the tropes alone, I just have to say I'm just not really interested nowadays in some of these books, even though I would personally love to receive a physical ARC or PR copy someday. Also, if you're somehow listening to this episode right now, I do want to apologize if I've not answered your message, as like I said, I get a lot of DMs, and I really only want to engage and respond to authors that I know for sure I'm actually going to read their books in the limited time that I do have. And nowadays, I just feel like a book has to have something really unique to hook me into reading it. And hence, this is where some indie authors are getting lost in the sea of tropey books. Not to mention a bunch of other factors that make it hard to get more recognition in the publishing industry. Now, I feel like I've made a lot of different points on this one topic, and I just want to clarify before I end that tropes aren't all bad. When written and used in the right way or more subtly, they can be a fun addition and even add personality to a romance storyline. I feel like there have been some golden gems in the romance book sector over the past few years by authors who, time and time again, prove why they are great writers. And it's partly because these authors are, again, able to write in a way that feels more authentic and not as forced, letting the characters and storyline play out naturally. And with this, I want to say in closing that it's safe to say that tropes aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Again, enemies to lovers. But the question now stands, what do they mean, and how will they affect the future of romance books and the publishing industry? Honestly, perhaps only time will tell. And with that, that's actually going to be it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed, although this was definitely a much shorter one. I know I've been putting out a lot of longer episodes, i.e. 30 minutes plus, so I wanted to bring you a hot and fast one today. I have to admit, I want to keep the episodes more consistently the same length, but since I've been experimenting a lot with different topics, more video/visual aspects, etc., it's really hard to predict and time the length of each episode currently. Perhaps this will get better with time in the future as I keep refining my ideas. At least that's the goal. But before we go, I do want to know what you all think about tropes, whether romance related or in general. I'd love to hear from you via my socials or leave a comment if you're listening on YouTube. As a reminder, I will still be posting video episodes over the next few months, so you should definitely subscribe if you haven't already to stay notified when I do upload those episodes. And it's free, not to mention. But as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here for episode 37. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.